I don't know. You're in charge of the buttons.
Numbers counting up.
Oh.
We've gotten pretty good at this stuff.
Yeah?
We haven't not hit record.
Well, you know what?
Although I just almost didn't hit record.
I was going to say, don't be saying that.
Yeah.
Don't be saying that.
Yeah.
Be careful.
That's all right.
Yeah.
A little dose of humility is good for us.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Humility is just one of those words. Powerful word.
Oh, it is a powerful word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a segue now. You have to run with it.
Well, I was just going to say hello, Justin.
Oh, right. Hello, Mark. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am well.
I hear you.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Speaking of humility, thank you for the humbling last night at Ultimate Frisbee. That was fun.
That was fun.
That was fun. It was a humbling experience, so that was good. Yeah. Fun time had by all.
Yeah. Sometimes, you guys are pretty good at humbling the other. Yeah. Like, Mark and John, his son, play on a team often. And when they get that chemistry going, there's literally no stopping it. Thankfully, last night, there was a little...
Yeah, it was a fun
short
time.
circuit in the chemistry, I think, because...
Yeah, it was good.
You let us have some victories.
Oh, it was fun.
It was fun.
There were some close ones that were fun, and then there were some blowouts that were humbling.
Yeah,
there
humbling.
You go. Humbling.
And I got to come over to your team for the last one.
Yeah,
and that was fun too.
Yeah. So we won when you were on our team. I'm not sure you decided to vote, but I will say your wife Megan, she was on your team.
Yeah.
And you guys won majority. So maybe Megan is the deciding.
She's the magic ticket.
The factor. Yeah. But yeah. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. Speaking of wives.
Yes.
It was your dear wife who
Yes.
suggested this topic.
Yes, it was.
This topic of the power of words.
Yes.
So this one goes out to Chris.
That's right.
We're going to talk about the power of words.
We are.
So
go ahead. We always say so at the same time. First person with the question wins.
What are some powerful words you've experienced in your life? And for the sake of, I don't know, to some sort of boundaries around this topic. Let's talk about. Well, I was gonna say single words, but you know what? That doesn't make that. Let's go wherever we need to go.
I hear you. Well, I think each word has a certain level of power, but when we combine them,
right? Because I was starting to think about like scripts based on something we heard, someone said to us when we were young.
That's where I was. That was ultimately
when
that was going to be my question for you, but you beat me to it in that process of thinking about the people who have spoken into your life at specific times. Mm-hmm. That for me, that defines more so the power of words and our ability at times to speak life into people or even circumstances, I would say, versus, the opposite of speaking life would be speaking death, criticism.
Yeah.
And I think both are an example of the power that words have. Mm-hmm. Our words are nuclear. Mm-hmm. It's not that just once the sound wave stops, that those words are done.
Yeah.
And I think, that's very mindful when we think about, or when we think back in our own lives, those people who have, either encouraged us or, criticized us, and how those words, even after the sound wave have died, are still, in our kind of lodged in our souls, if you will.
Yeah.
To that degree, I believe that is part of the power of words.
Yep.
And yet,
it's the lodging in the soul. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I can certainly, and this is a question I will ask to you first.
Oh, no problem.
But I can certainly think of words or like, statements said at certain times in my life that kind of have carried with me as a script, right? Like
Sure.
when I say script, I mean kind of a something that comes up in my head over and over my whole life to kind of tries to define who I think I can be or should or shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious if you have any of those and what comes to mind.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting. I've probably had at least 4, mentors in my life, that I really just kind of, and I think back on those conversations at times. And I don't know whether I've mentioned it before, but Jeff Patton was very influential for me.
I remember hearing that name.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jeff Patton.
Well, he died of COVID.
I mean,
but
in memory.
In memory.
Rest in peace, dear
But yeah,
friend.
he definitely spoke, words into my life. He was, even when Chris and I, kind of thinking of Chris, when Chris and I were dating, just having those conversations with him, about, marriage and relationship and that kind of thing. And, other people who came in at times, during life cycles, when you're in the midst of trying to make a decision, and, I had a fella who is still alive. Bill is his name, we were, when we were thinking about moving to South Carolina or to North Carolina as far as the church plant, he just really spoke, about faith. And then we talked about Jonah and, that part where he's sinking in the water. And, I've exchanged, Jonah was saying, I have exchanged the blessings of God for worthless idols. And just people, it doesn't always have to be scripture for me, but, those things that, kind of speak and say, okay, yeah, this is a pivotal moment. And those guys, for my life were there to encourage me with, positive words. And, I can reflect back on those. And of course, even, especially with Chris and, the kids even, there's those moments where, they speak and it's like the light bulb goes off because they just said something that kind of affirmed or even challenged who I was as a husband, father, those kind of things. So I think those are the power words. And I think we don't necessarily recognize that power at times when we're just wanting to spout off, if I may say so, in the midst of anger or reactivity.
Yeah.
How about you? What about what people or places or circumstances come to mind when you think of pivotal moments or power of words?
Well, before that, you made me think about how, we don't recognize the power of words until we see the power, right? Like it's often where it especially when it's my words that were powerful in a negative way in particular, that it's like, well, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube,
Yeah.
Which, I think there is room for redemption and apologizing and that kind of thing. And I definitely, as the resident critic here, I definitely pray that there will be some redemption for some of my inert criticism. No, whatever. My default state, which is to want to criticize or to make better.
Sure. Excellence.
Yeah, exactly. Excellence. Call back to a couple weeks ago. You need to listen to that. But yeah, I think so. And I think for me, I can think of instances where I've said things where I just pray and hope it doesn't become one of those stuck in the head things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You'd like an eraser if you could.
Yeah. And in fact, I've known Megan since I was in 7th grade, and we've dated since I think I was in think when I was a senior, we started dating. I can't remember. Megan would remember.
Sure.
And like, so there's been, there's many, many years of dialogue between us, but
Sure.
there's certainly some things that roll around in Megan's head that I said, the first
sure.
year we were married, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, man, I wish I could go back to stupid Justin and smack that out of his mouth.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, and often there are things where, like you said, it's said in a frustrating moment or, and it's not even the full extent of how, we feel. Right? Sure. I think about also my dad, who often tells me the story because I sing, with worship and stuff like that, and I play guitar, and so
anything you want to sing right now? Come and do mine.
Happy birthday to you. Is it your birthday?
No, but
okay.
that was
there you go.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Back to your dad.
Thank you very much. He often tells the story of how his third grade teacher called him out for how bad his singing was.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like,
sure.
Say, I can't remember the comment, but he, it was a pretty critical, almost making fun of him comment.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Sure.
And he basically, I think he just internalized that and said, "Oh, that's who I am. I'm the kid who can't sing. I got it. Check."
Sure.
And kind of just that was his identity from that point until now. I mean, and I don't think he doesn't think he can sing anymore, but I just think the idea of singing in front of other people is just no thanks,
Yeah.
And I totally get that too. I definitely, because I struggled a lot with self-esteem when I was younger. If someone would have said that to me, I can relate completely. Thankfully, I didn't put myself out there in that way, because I'm sure I would have gotten comments like that. Whatever level I'm able to sing now has taken a lot of work to try and kind of refine the rough material that what I would say my voice is. So
there you go.
And I think that's true, just as far as singing goes. I think almost anyone can sing with a little bit of work. And there's not like this inherent gene you get where, unless you can't sing on key. I mean, that's an unfortunate situation, but that doesn't mean you can't sing. It just means people might not enjoy hearing it. But other than that, you can work out a lot of kinks in tonality and stuff like that.
Huh?
Yeah. Not and
but that would be the power of a song.
Yeah, it would be the power of a vocal teacher.
Yes. But I think about it as I make the joke. I think about it too. Even songs.
Yeah.
Worship.
Yeah.
The power of words to be able to, encourage, to lift up, to transform our focus at times. And I was thinking about when you were talking about early on, first year, Justin, Megan, what do you think makes the difference for you from then till now? What has been that transformation, if you will?
Well, transformation is a strong word.
Yeah.
I'm still Justin, so, I think like every husband probably slips up, time to time, says the wrong thing at the wrong time, and then finds out that it really had an impact that was unintended. So I would say that's certainly still a thing that happens. I think the answer is more likely a shared growth. In other words, growth in Megan to understand sometimes Justin, says stuff when he's, sometimes humans say things when they're frustrated they don't mean from the bottom of their heart, and kind of a, like I said, kind of a growth on her part to understand that.
Yeah.
And a growth on my part to, try not to say as much when the whole, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all. But especially if you're angry or frustrated in the moment, it's better to keep your mouth shut. So definitely some of that. But like I said, I think I wouldn't say I'm completely transformed. I still struggle with,
no, I hear you.
Saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. And again, critique is kind of an Achilles heel of mine. And I find, I'll let little critiques slip out and go, why?
Yeah.
That's not a hill worth even crossing, much
Sure.
less dying over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I
And I with you, I think that, or I was thinking, speaking of words, the word maturity comes to mind. I think, as we grow older to a certain degree or grow in relationship with someone, we hopefully tend to learn those aspects where, oh, shucks, that didn't have the intended effect that I wanted. And if anything, it was actually counterproductive to building that relationship. And I think, as we tend to age, we become more mindful of how, our words. I think it can be kind of that accumulation of words and being able to recognize, because I think there's a lot of things that we might implement or change or do momentarily that we don't always necessarily reap the harvest of until, a couple years down the road. Then we say, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say, or go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about it, even, when we think about right and wrong words, or right and wrong things to say, I'm reminded kind of the point. I don't think it's as much. I think we can say most anything that needs to be said, but I think the way we say it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
In that context, when we think of the power of words, it's not that, I can't complain about a circumstance, but yet when it goes towards criticism versus just, when I'm tearing a person down in the midst of my complaint, then I believe we're crossing a line. And I think at times, in our sarcastic world, we don't always stop at times to think about, does that really need to be said in that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a question for you in a minute.
Okay.
That you can ruminate on, because I have another question for you.
Fire away.
Now. So.
Okay. Yeah. I hear you.
Here's a question for them in a minute. Is there room for criticism in a is there room for criticism and in what context? So that's something to ruminate on.
That's the future question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The now question is going back to the question about kind of background or whatever. Do you have experiences where you recognize words that you said that you wish you could take back, that kind of thing? Like,
oh, sure.
As opposed to the ones you experience, maybe
where I said that I could take. Oh, yeah.
Let's see your skeletons, Mark.
Oh, no, there'd be a number of them. I could identify with that early marriage frustration dynamic, and words I said, and I'll be the other transparency. So yeah, that would be, in relationship with Chris. And I can think back, even as a teenager, there were moments, when it might have seemed cool in the moment to, disparage my parents, or, that's a tough one, because, I can still, I respect my parents so much to this day now, but yet, as a teenager, you could make a joke of your parents, and, that just kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies to a degree at this point, to think of it, that I would have said what I honestly said back then, and yet recognize who they are and the relationship I have with them now. And there again, I think in some ways that becomes more of a matter of maturity and being able to recognize that, circumstantially, I understand it, but if you could go back, it's like, no, that would not be an utterance again,
right.
That kind of thing.
Which ties right into the maturity that you were saying. I think the truth of the matter is maturity is seeing what I did that didn't work and going, oops, I won't do that again. Right.
Yeah,
so I mean,
exactly.
Some of the some aspects of maturity you don't get any other way than to walk a bad path and go, not that one again.
Yep.
And
that learning process.
I wish you could take that out of the maturity process, but I just don't think it's possible to extract it. I think we learn best from our own mistakes.
And I think those things, and here again, I would dare say, like sarcasm, or I would even say, like chauvinism. Some of those things are transgenerational.
Yeah.
To where
the maturity didn't quite
Yeah.
reach its full potential in the previous generation, and therefore you
still use those same words, or
Yeah.
you use words in, I'll call it a negative power.
Yeah, chauvinism, racism.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was also thinking, you talking about younger days, right?
Right.
I was thinking about one of my formative memories was I used to have, a really good friend growing up. Probably I'm gonna go with it's somewhere between 8 years old and 15, right? Somewhere
Sure.
in there. I
Yeah, yeah.
remember. But I'm gonna lean towards the younger. Where I used to go over his house all the time. He had everything. Like they had horses and they had like 4-wheelers. Like they in my mind and they had this huge, a billion acres, and there was no end to what they had, kind of thing. And so in my mind they were kind of invincible.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember any of the words I used. I just know that at one point, his mom called my mom and said, "I'm not sure Justin can come over here anymore."
Wow.
Because he's out. And again, I don't remember this conversation exactly what she said, but it's essentially he tears down my son.
Oh wow. Sure.
And I look back, I don't remember the words, but I can definitely remember the spirit of like, no, that's not what my goal was. My goal was to be at his level. Right? Like I wanted to be able to be as cool as they were and he was,
I gotcha. Sure.
And I think as a result, I would say, "Oh, that's not cool. This is cool," or whatever that that whole thing that kids do. And I just remember her telling me that and just being so embarrassed. Like I got my pants caught down and didn't know it. You know what I mean? It's like, because I didn't know I was doing it, and I certainly didn't want to hurt my friend that way. I felt really, really bad, and I didn't know I was doing it. I didn't realize the power of my own words. You know? And so I don't know. That was a pretty formative experience to where, I don't. Yeah, like I think, maybe that's one of those experiences that kind of triggered me towards like that approval dynamic of making sure people aren't upset with me.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want to, because it's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Speaking
those
of going
words,
back into the skeletons there, nice job. Boy, you bring that one out of the closet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we do.
And I was
That's
thinking,
how I see it.
Too, and I was as we were sharing there, I think, I think most, as a parent, let's put it that way, myself as a parent, there would definitely be areas, well, especially a homeschooling parent, I can remember times where, I might have got frustrated in a moment and definitely said some things to, John or Lizzie, that was, I wish I could take back, but, there again, it was in those moments, not to justify it, but, in those moments of frustration, I can remember them and the words that, you wish you could undo, and that being said too, I think, it's interesting because you think about it in a context of relationship, and there's a 10-to-1 principle that just comes to mind as I was thinking about, my areas of homeschooling, and things I've said, it's basically 10. Roughly, it can range between 15 to 5, depending on the research. But so that's why they typically go around 10. It takes 10 positive interactions to offset every one negative interaction. And I think about that in our culture, and and how often we use sarcasm. And I think at times our ratio just gets completely flip-flopped.
Yeah.
We'll have 10 sarcastic comments before we even have one that's heartfelt, that offers encouragement or that kind of thing. And I think, I can definitely see that at times in couples, when a couple is really in a negative cycle, and, thinking back on your own relationship, in those moments when all I'm doing is looking for the negative things or the things that I think you do wrong, you know, it's a difficult dynamic to come out of. Not that it can't be done, but of course, you know, it's you gotta be mindful. You gotta be, you know, conscious of the power of words, because I do believe, you know, it's like most relationships, when they get into that negative cycle, if you're not able to identify it, it's that power of words that actually tear the relationship apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, where I just don't see the good in you anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm only seeing what's, from my perspective, flawed or that you do wrong. You know, and if I may, can I segue to the question?
You may. That's a perfect thing.
I was thinking about it.
I thought that's what the 10-1 was.
Well, no, the 10-1 was kind of part of what it was a combination of what I had done in combination with the redemption.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you had mentioned, you know, because we are human and we're going to make, you know.
Yeah, you can have a perfect record, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah, there is no perfect record in our word choices.
Right.
And I think about that in the context of, even as I was sharing as a parent, you know, I'm hopeful that, you know, I'm hoping that the times that my words were used in a negative way or a critical way have been offset. You know, by at least however many there were, multiply that by 10. Yeah. I hope I had, you know, the 10, the 0 at the end that offsets that. Yeah. You know, because that would, and yet I also realize there's, you know, there's moments where those were like with your dad. There's moments when those words in combination just stick with me because that person, you know, at that moment was the authority, or I saw that person as the authority, and it makes a difference. So that being said, go ahead,
real quick.
Sure,
we'll get there.
Yeah.
Though, like you just said, sometimes the combination, or whatever, I think there's something, you know, speaking of the power of words, when those words connect to an inner inferiority issue, or it's, you know, some sort of inner insecurity. Yeah. When those words connect to that, it's like the power that it takes on at that point is exponential. And when I say exponential, I mean like it can repeat for years and years and years. Yeah. Because it's now confirmed right, in my mind, you know, that the thing I had a insecurity about, or a thing I feared, is true. Yeah. And we don't often have the defenses to go, but maybe it's not true. It's like, nope, it's confirmed. Yeah. You know? And so I think that's part of the power of the words, is when they connect to a nerve. Yep. You know.
And I agree with that, and I think that's where we do need to be mindful of the words we use, because we don't know when that's going to happen. Those who those insecurities are. And it's interesting, you know, the minute you kind of shared that, you know, even in the sessions that sometimes I'll do, you know, it's like I'm honestly trying to be mindful of challenging some patterns or cycles that I see. And it's funny how oftentimes, even to the degree that I try to do that in a tactful or kind or, you know, therapeutic manner, it's not like I'm, you know, aggressive from my perspective, but yet at times just that challenging of that pattern or cycle, it can be viewed as, he's beating me up. Yeah. I don't want to go back there, you know, and it's like, okay, you know, I mean, not intentional, but I couldn't see that pothole to a certain degree. And sure enough, I drove right over it and never even realized it. But it wasn't until, you know, feedback comes back from a spouse or something later on. It's like, no, that was, and, you know, fortunately there again,
you did the thing.
I did. Yeah. I did,
don't do
you know,
the thing.
And I realized sometimes that I take ownership of that, but sometimes that's not all mine to own either, and I have to with those sometimes the words in combination. But that does bring me back to, if you will, a little bit, speaking of the power of words, a pet peeve of mine is constructive criticism. I don't really think there is such a thing for me personally. So, you were asking, is there a moment, for critique? I mean, I can see, I think there's, let's, if I may, based on the power
Only
of
if
words.
It's how you see it.
This is how I see it. I think there's a difference between critique and criticism. Mm-hmm. And I think learning is better than critique. Mm-hmm. So if I'm able to help someone learn a different, and I don't think I have to tear that person down. And granted, that's my perception of criticism, is kind of tearing down. And I think learning is that opportunity to build up. And I'm able to say that differently, versus, the difference between here's what I saw and I'm curious what your thoughts are versus I noticed you did this. And I think you need to change that. You follow me? In that process, there again, the power of words.
It makes me think of the term calling someone up versus tearing them down.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Calling them to where they could be, should be versus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think criticism has to be a part of that. To call someone up. And granted, I mean, are we going to identify, certain flaws or certain characteristics, and the way those flaws tend to, either hamper what you do or a relationship? Sure. But I don't, and I guess for me, the difference between, criticism and learning is, criticism tends to tear someone down versus call them up. And I don't have to look down or put somebody down to call them up.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that's a difference. And it's like, for a long time, it just seemed like, well, it's constructive criticism. It's like, it's kind of an oxymoron in my perspective,
Yeah. My similar pet peeve is the compliment sandwich.
Sure.
Is like,
compliment,
right? Because that ratio is only 2 to 1.
Yeah, I agree.
When it's supposed to be 10.
Yeah.
So when it's 2 to 1, you're like, I know what this is. All right, let's get through this good thing.
Give me the second part.
Yeah, give me the real stuff. All right.
Yeah. What did I screw up?
Wrap it up with the other good thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels very manufactured.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a whole train of thought and it just disappeared.
Compliment sandwich.
Compliment sandwich. Nah,
criticism.
I don't think it's going to come until you start talking.
Okay.
That's usually how it works.
So here's the deal. Is if
Oh, I remember now.
Okay, go for it. Keep it wild because I got mine. No problem.
Okay, you do?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm good.
Well, I was just thinking about sometimes some of the things that we say in here are so counter. They don't seem correct in the sense that they don't line up with just the way things are. But that doesn't mean it's not possible. So in other words, what you're saying is I don't think criticism is necessary or helpful. And yet, there's a multi-million, billion-dollar industry in criticism, right? Movie critics, restaurant critics, and, they create a certain, set of circumstances to where the best chefs in the world become recognized, the best restaurants in the world, the Michelin stars, movies, the Oscars, all that kind of stuff. They're like, you made it through the gauntlet of criticism. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you.
You're above, you've made it above our level of criticism as professional criticizers, almost like. And so like, it's just, it doesn't even seem right when you say criticism's not acceptable, right? It's like, well, how does one exist then, without that? And but that doesn't mean I don't agree with you. I'm just kind of thinking it through, and I like what you're saying, and I think it's kind of like the pride thing, right? That we talked about, where it's like you're like, I don't think there's room for pride or whatever, like whatever that conversation was like, but the whole world's built on pride in your team, pride in your nation, pride in your children, pride in yourself,
Sure.
American dream, all these things. Like, what you're saying, it doesn't make any sense. And I feel like that, along with this, is kind of ties into why like God's kingdom is upside down.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Where the things that work in this world don't work in that one. And the first is last and the last is first. You know? So
no,
like
I agree.
some of those things that you challenge that seem unrealistic, I think, are the actual status quo in God's kingdom. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think about it sometimes as you're saying that, I think, to me that culture of critique or culture of criticism, it's like, I think about if somebody were to, inspect or, me at just certain moments, I'd fail that as well.
Right.
A moment in time, one moment in time doesn't necessarily define an entire career or an entire thing from my perspective,
It's true.
and I think, there are
people can have a bad day.
Yeah. And people, and unfortunately that people rise and fall.
Yeah.
There's real people involved in that, when a restaurant is critiqued, that kind of thing. And it's just,
And yet you think of the ones that rose to the top as like they climbed over this pile of criticism to get to the top, It's like the resilience they had or whatever. And I also feel like they probably got a fair share of baggage. Don't you think?
Yeah. No, it's just interesting to think about. And in that process, there again, words build up and words tear down. And I think, even in,
Yeah, and I think speaking of, go
ahead.
The kingdom. Think about Jesus, and before he died, he told Peter, "Just by the way, you are going to deny me before the end of the night three whole times."
Yeah.
And Peter is just appalled. Like, of course, I would never. I'm your best guy. Like, and obviously Peter didn't anticipate circumstances coming to where it completely threw him off his game, to like where you said he had a bad day.
Yeah.
And he kind of lost some of who he was and, what he believed in, and he was shaken, and I think it's important. I think we can villainize him in those moments, but I think it's way better to empathize with him. Go, have I done, kind of. Yeah. Anyway, he denied him 3 times when Jesus, in his dire moments or whatever. And then later, when Jesus rose from the dead and they're having a conversation, I love the conversation they had because he didn't say, "Remember that time?" Like, "What's wrong with you?" That was wrong or whatever. Instead, he just said, like, "Peter, do you love me?" He said, "Of course I do." Okay, then feed my sheep. It's like, and he repeated that 3 times to where Peter was becoming defensive. Like, "What are you trying to say?" And, he was basically calling him up, and it wasn't a critique of what he did or who he was, but it was saying, "Let's move forward from this."
Yeah.
And he didn't have to do the critique.
He didn't. Agreed.
Which is like, how did he do that? And I like what you're saying about learning and calling people up. That is a skill I desire to get better at.
No, I hear you. And I think we can all improve. And as I was thinking about, as you describe, that circumstance, what do you think Peter felt in those moments?
Well, humility. I think, like embarrassment is maybe a better answer.
Yeah. I think, all of that, confusion, disappointment.
Yeah. Which moments, I guess.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, that is where the power of words come into play.
Right.
Because
when someone's at their most vulnerable.
Yes.
That's when,
and we can empathize with all of that.
Yeah.
And recognize it makes perfect sense. And we don't have to criticize someone about that. We're just able to from our own human standpoint, recognize, shucks, I've been embarrassed too. And there's a big difference between being embarrassed and being sad, and I think, that's where the power of words come into play in a lot of cases, because there is a difference between being embarrassed and sad and disappointed and humiliated. And I think that's where, I think for Chris, that's where a lot of that comes from, is the right word at the right time to define the right circumstance is a powerful thing.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes good writing so difficult, is that moment where I want to say it a certain way and I just can't come up with the right word. But when I do come up with the right word, it's like, aha, yeah, that's the word. And as I'm thinking about that, if you had to, this is a little bit of a trick question, but if you had to think about 3 words for you that, really are important ones. I realize this is an on-the-spot question.
Well, what's super weird is you said 3 words. And immediately 3 words popped into my mind.
Well, okay, cool.
From a verse.
Yeah?
Yeah. So I'll share that, even though I don't know if that's
I was just curious.
Answer that I would give.
I just three words.
It's very interesting that they popped in my mind.
So what are those words?
Power, love, and a sound mind. That's 2 words, the last one, but that's what came to my mind.
Power, love, and a sound mind. Well, here's
psychoanalyze.
Here's a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. Sound mind. Can you put that together in one word? Can you think
sanity?
See, there you go.
Yes.
Nice job. Power of words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So power, love, and sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. And it wasn't a psychoanalytical moment, but I was thinking of please, sorry, and thanks.
Nice. Yeah. Those are good words.
Just those.
Yeah. Again, the words that came to mind. I don't know why they came to mind.
That's
they
okay.
They don't really tie to it, but yeah, I like the please.
We can unwrap that power. That just power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The power of words.
Power, love, and
how about that?
And sanity or sound mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. You said please, thank you, and what?
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are that's your tool belt right there.
Well,
for some powerful words.
And I think here again, I want to recognize there's a big difference between words and vocabulary. You follow me? I think we can have a tremendous vocabulary and know a lot of words, but if we're not using them in a manner that, builds people up, or, because,
it's not the power of vocabulary.
Exactly.
That's a different talk.
And yet we can respect, people who, we listen to who, it's like, if you didn't have context, you'd have a hard time. And sometimes even with the context, you'd have a hard time. What was that word again? I need to look that up. Yeah. And I respect that.
Yeah.
But, that in itself, vocabulary, we're not talking about, like you said, the power of vocabulary, but the power of words. And I think,
Ooh.
Yeah.
Just thought of a word I looked up the other day.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What was it?
I know it. Importunity. Do you know what that means?
Ooh. I would say it's an important moment.
No, it's importune. Not
inopportune?
Not importune.
Okay. Go for it.
It's not having to do with opportunity. Got any other guesses? You don't have.
Tunity. I'm thinking of like a unifying. But that's just a word, that's just
importunity, or to importune is to basically continue to ask a thing to where it becomes annoying.
Oh, okay.
So the importunity of someone is someone annoying you to the word.
Sure.
Kind of like
Ad
the persistent
nauseam.
Widow, right?
Yes.
Ad nauseum,
Yeah. Cool. So the persistent, it's another word for persistence.
Yeah, but
it's
almost has a
annoying
negative
persistence.
context
Sure.
from the hearer's perspective.
Sure.
Like that's one of my favorite things about vocabulary, right? It's like you have to say all these words to make this one word, right? So if you pick the right word, it really conveys some
Agreed.
really important nuance, which I think is cool. But like it's this idea that maybe it's annoying to the hearer, but maybe it's valuable.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of like the persistent widow, like what's being
Nagging comes to mind.
But nagging is only negative, and you think of the person doing the nagging as a nagger. Like it's almost has this context of, but they're persisting a thing that maybe should be. Does that
Sure,
make sense?
I hear you. Yeah, it's important
That's
to the
how I read it.
persistent person, but yet the person hearing
Yeah.
might not.
Yeah, nagging doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason there's that word.
That's right. And also, I could be misremembering what I looked up.
Well,
it could be,
yeah.
but that was kind of what I liked about it. That's your little vocabulary lesson for the day. Power of
power, love,
vocabulary.
and sound mind.
Importunity.
Brought to you by a sound mind.
Yes.
If you will, thinking about the power of words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What would be what would be your encouragement to someone as far as being able to implement or being mindful of that power? When you think of power, love, I'm thinking of power of words.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
there's different audiences for that, right? So there's one audience would be those who just, kind of lack the self-esteem, to understand the power of their words, and so they just fling them out all over the place, right?
Yep.
And to the degree where they've kind of lost some of the power of their words, right? They're always cussing. They're always, whatever, complaining. They're always whatever. Or they...
When you say they've lost the power of words, help me understand that.
Yeah, I will one sec.
Okay.
Or they've lost... they're dramatic, right? So they're always over-describing, over-dramatizing.
Always is a good word for always,
exactly.
never.
They always do it. Exactly. Those dramatic people. Nice. Way to call me out. No, but you get the point.
No,
so
I do. I do.
There's different perspectives of but I think what I mean by lost the power of words is that essentially it's kind of the boy who cried wolf syndrome, where those words become less potent because they are maybe not as synced with the truth.
Sure.
Or or they're overused to the where they're dull. They're dull to the hear. Yeah, and they're maybe not believed. Where the wolf did eventually come.
Yeah,
and it was a true saying.
Right.
That there's a wolf. At that point, those words were so dull that they were ignored. You know what I mean. So the power of those words were gone.
Yep.
From that boy, right?
Yeah.
That's
I
what
like.
I mean.
I like what you're saying, because I think in our lives we can, use too many words too crassly.
Yeah.
And there may come a moment when we want to be able to speak to a situation and we no longer have a authority to do so. Not the authorities, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
A credibility.
Yeah.
We've lost credibility. And I think that from my perspective, that becomes a lot of what sarcasm can be. Mm-hmm. Because I'll say something, it's like, and it's typically right on that edge.
Yeah.
But yet there's that part of it that comes back and says, well, was that really a compliment or was that a backhanded?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the big problems with sarcasm is it creates callous, right?
Sure.
Right. So it's like, there may be truth in there, but I'm ignoring it. Like, you're just doing your thing, your sarcastic thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think no matter the audience, right? Whether it's that person or someone who, is critical, Justin, like kind of much, or it's someone who just doesn't believe in the power of their words.
Sure.
I think for any of those categories, the encouragement to try the 10-to-1 thing is going to be a good
Sure.
a good thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's say you don't use your words much. You don't believe your words have much value, and you don't, you know what I mean? Like, you just
Yeah.
don't feel heard or whatever. Well, why don't you try starting to call out some good stuff around you?
Yeah.
You know, doesn't have to be about a particular person even. It can be like, wow, I can't believe how nice it is today. Or like, it's a little humid, but I really enjoy this kind of weather. Like, just some positive things. Or like, wow, your truck looks really nice today. Did you clean it by hand or something? Like, how'd you get, you know, whatever. Or like, you know, if it's a coworker being like, your hammer swing looks amazing today. I think you find yourself pretty surprised at the impact those statements can make.
Yeah. And
at the power, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that for me, when you're saying, you know, off and on, of course, that scripture of, do you not know that the power of life and death are in the tongue? You know, and I think, you know, as a culture at times, we've lost sight of that.
Yeah.
That, you know, like you were saying, you know, calling people up versus, you know, tearing them down. I think that's the difference between the power of life and death that's in the tongue. And, you know, I think we can do that with our kids. I think we can do that with the relationships, you know, in general. It's, you know, I think we can do that even where, you know, where our, you know, health and, you know, and welfare is, you know, to speak blessing, you know, is, I think, you know, I think there's so much of our world that we don't know, you know, to the point of the power of words is one of those things. And I think, you know, in a created world that was spoken into existence by the power of words, I think, you know, the words we use in this world still have a resonating power, if you will, to change circumstances and bring life versus tear down. And so you know, it's just kind of I think that's just the way the world is designed. When we want to speak that way. Yeah.
And the Bible says we were created in God's image, right?
Sure.
So that's certainly an aspect where I like how you describe that, because that resonance of his image in the power of our words.
Sure.
To create or destroy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Oh.
Power of words.
Yes, indeed.
That is a good topic, Chris.
Yes, it was. Yes.
And speaking of words, Chris, you're awesome.
There you go.
You're also awesome with words.
Yes. I mean, there's no surprise that came from Chris.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
because
right.
Yes, she definitely is a writer and someone who I value, and her ability to think about what she will say before I've learned. She's taught me, you know. Yeah.
Also, she's the genesis of the Marxisms, like her calling you up to using better words. Is kind of where this whole conversation about Marxisms came.
You've been there for
what
some
does
of those
I hear you
times.
mean? You know, it's like what it means to me is it's Mark. That's what it means. But so it's very appropriate.
Yes,
conversation.
Indeed. Yes. So thank you, Chris.
Yes.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah. And that's how we see it.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.